Hi, I'm Ali Jackson-Jolley. I am here with David Lee. He is a strategic consultant in the realm of tech. David, welcome and thank you for being here with us.
Oh, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so you sent me some information that I thought was interesting that I wanted to talk to you about,
hmm
and that was around the idea that the recent rise in unemployment um, around specific to the Black community um, is somehow related to what we're seeing in tech trends in employment. Could you sort of speak to me what you mean by that and how the two may be related?
Yeah, so specifically when we look at, right now unemployment within the tech space has been a big thing. We've seen a lot of layoffs. Also, what we've seen probably over the last 15 months with that is this kind of backlash against DE&I programs, which really to the heart of it, make sure that tech companies are creating a diverse and equitable, place for people to come and work. And with that, what kind of got thrown out the baby with the bathwater is like, oh, well, DEI, this doesn't work, and we're putting unqualified people in places, and so we don't need that. And unfortunately, in the tech space specifically, hiring is very network based, right? It really is about like kind of who you know and who you're comfortable with and who you worked with before. And so we already have this problem in the tech space where it's not a very diverse space in the first place. And so when things like this start to happen, people then go back on their norms and go, well, I'm just going to go back into my network, which is a non-diverse pool in the first place. So we kind of get that double impact when you start to have things like this, where you've got both a backlash against DEI, we've got high unemployment and layoffs, and so it's harder and harder for people of color to get into, specifically in the tech space, because of the two things that we have happening right now.
Okay, and then so how about do you can you speak to how many over the last um, 12 to 15 months Black employees working in tech have been let go? Do you have stats on that will give us like a larger idea of how many Black professionals in tech have gotten the axe recently?
I don't have exact numbers that I put out there. Sometimes a lot of employers don't release that information. They'll let you know like, hey, we're reducing workforce by this percent, right? But sometimes they don't actually go down the details of like who they're releasing, where they're releasing, right? But in general, we do know we have general numbers around like the tech layoffs in general. There's been, I think the last number I saw was um, over between 100 and 200,000 jobs. I'm not quite sure. I don't have the stats in front of me that have been reduced. And so a lot of that, when you see those reductions in those workforces, sometimes it's things like marketing, sales, but lately we've seen even engineering teams get hit, things of that nature. It's been more anecdotal when you see a lot of Black people that are in the tech space coming and trying to get jobs. There's a lot of people trying to get in, and they talk about how much harder it is. But no, I don't have exact numbers of how many have been laid off.
So let's talk anecdotally what you've been seeing. Have you seen that post 2020 Black professionals trying to get into the tech space were perhaps making some headway with getting the offer to come interview or building networks, and now in these last 15 months, um, things have gotten tougher? Or talk to me about that, please.
Yeah, so I'll I'll start with kind of how I got into my career, right? I went what you would consider the more traditional path. My background's computer science. I came out with a computer science degree, was a software engineer, and so I kind of went in that way. But this was early 2003, 2004, and at that time, like that's what people look for degrees. They wanted to see master's degrees, bachelor degrees in science and engineering. As time progressed and tech became a little bit more accessible, you got people who can go to boot camps, different things like that. We were starting to realize that in tech, there's non-technical jobs, and so the aperture starting to widen a lot more as my career, I would say like midpoint to my career. And right around 2018, 2019, what we started to see is we started to talk a lot more about, specifically in tech and even niching down more cybersecurity, like just the skills gap, that there's all these jobs open and we don't have enough people to fill them. And so more and more people were starting to get interested in coming over. And so companies were starting to create and focus on kind of non-traditional paths to get people in. And so we just saw a widening of the aperture of the pool of talent looking at it. And so while the numbers still weren't great, they were at least for the most part, improving. You were seeing companies were willing to at least take a little bit more risk and, go and recruit places where they weren't before. As we kind of walked into 2020, COVID happens. Everybody starts to work from home. Tech starts to become a thing. People are really trying to apply for these jobs. And then as we come out of that, right, we see this tightening of the belt as a lot of companies overspent. Now they're coming back out, like, the market starts to change. Money's not free anymore. Companies are starting to tighten their belts. And so what happened is when we have these layoffs, we have an influx of people that were already in the space coming out, more than we've seen probably in the last 10 years. So you've had like professionals who are already in the space now competing with people who want to get in this space. And then to the earlier point I said before, the tech world, I've been in it 20 years. I know how it works. Like it's a very niche group, right? You're going to take the people that like if you're looking under pressure to go and build a team, you're going to reach for people that you work with in the past or somebody else that and those pools are awfully, kind of small. So what's kind of led to this is kind of a perfect storm of, as people were starting to get interested and come in, between the layoffs and the different change within the economic market and companies starting to take a turn, you start to see now it's like where there was maybe one position available and there was 50 candidates. Now you're seeing 100 candidates, 200 candidates. And so people start to come back with their networks a little more. And programs like DEI programs, and I'm always very cautious when I talk about this. It's not, DEI programs aren't, we're just going to go hire people of color or hire a woman and hire this. That wasn't what DEI programs were about. It was about making sure, hey, culturally within your organization, are you creating an environment? Are you looking into like your recruiting pool and making sure you have a diverse pool? Are you doing things and checking your hiring standards and making sure you're not being biased? There were programs in place to make sure that you were constantly looking past your small little network and helping an organization organically grow and do that. You start to see the backlash against that. You have an influx of laid off people in talent, and now it's just extremely hard for somebody trying to get into this space. And so that's what a lot of Black Americans are facing trying to get into the tech space. And so it's kind of added this perfect storm of all these things kind of against it. And so now the tech space is kind of regressing in a little bit, where it's like, okay, well, we looked 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when everybody wanted to put out their diversity reports, and we're still seeing the same numbers, right? We're still seeing that, like, maybe an organization, one of the big ones, has like 6%, African Americans in their staff, or, 3% women in leadership positions. Like, it's bad, right? And so we're trying to figure out the ways to go back and combat that and not go back to our old ways. And it's one that it takes having some conversations. Sometimes they're uncomfortable.
So, what do you say to? I'm going to ask you both ways. I'm going to ask you for advice for companies, but I'm also going to ask you for advice for Black professionals who are looking to break in. So let's start there. What do you say to young, early career, we'll say, Black professionals who are looking, they think they have the chops, or they know they have the smarts, they know they have the interest, they want to break in. What do you say to them? How do you do that, knowing that this is a very insular industry in which networking is key?
I would absolutely tell them to start right there and start networking, right? Either through, if it's social media networking, if it's LinkedIn, right? There's some great websites that are coming out of City, which is one that is aimed at Black professionals. There's tech conferences, there's local meetups around your area. You want to go to where the tech people are meeting and connecting, and start connecting and talking with them, right? Be present, be seen, right? Take a different tack at, instead of just looking at something and saying, here's a position, go apply for it. I tell people all the time, I was like, especially if they want to get into cybersecurity, I was like, hack your way into a job. And here's what I mean by that. If I see a position that's available, it's Acme Corporation and they're hiring for a penetration tester, and that's what I want to do. I go look at the position, but then I go to LinkedIn and I go look at the company, right? Okay, who probably works in that division? How many people do I know in the company? Do I know anybody that knows them in the company? What else positions have they posted? Let me start talking to people around the company. Don't just talk to the recruiter. LinkedIn some other people. Maybe you went to college with somebody, or a friend of yours went to college with somebody. That's one of the great things about LinkedIn and the way it's built, is you can start to see connections and start to talk to the people that are around the position that you want to. Go look at the description and see what they're looking for. I think a lot of it now, you're going to have to show a little bit more extra effort than before. If you want to do something, go find a side project and build it. Start blogging about it. Start getting out there so people can find you. right? You're not just a resume that came through. People can find your work. They can see where you're contributing to things. You kind of really have to be active and get to the scene to where people are, connect with people, find mentors, and figure out ways that you can help them. Like it just takes a little bit of extra effort to get in, because then once you're in the circle and somebody comes across something, I can't tell you how many meetings I've been in when we're planning, we're getting ready to hire in somebody. It's like, oh, somebody says, oh, you know what? I worked with such and such a while ago. Or this person told me, didn't you have a friend that you were working and help mentoring? Like maybe they'd be perfect for this position. That's kind of where it starts, right? And it's the truth of it, right? Not that companies are trying to do anything nefarious. Maybe some are, maybe some aren't. But it's just human nature. If you want to work on something, you think about people like, who do I know that I can work with? And so you want to make sure that you're increasing that circle that you have that are thinking of you when that position comes available.
Okay, and now let's look on the other side of that. We know,
Hmm.
as you mentioned, times are tight. Everyone is looking to tighten their belt. There is a backlash against diversity, equity, and inclusion. I like to say the words out because I think it's harder to be opposed to equity and inclusion than DEI. Um,
Correct.
but what do you
Like
say
that.
to firms who um, right. Like you said, it's easier just to go to your friend, and your friend is usually someone who looks like you, who's in your same social networks. So, what do you
Right.
say to them when you're trying to consult them on how to be more inclusive with talent and recruiting?
Honestly, the first thing I tell is like you've got to look yourself in the mirror and be ready to have a very uncomfortable conversation, right? You've got to be willing to take action and say this is definitely something I want to do for this organization, and that starts kind of at the leadership and accepting the fact that this is something we're going to do. We know it may take us maybe a little bit more time because we don't have those networks, but we're going to take the time to actually build it. So that's the first thing is like be intentional, right? I was asked before a couple of weeks ago, brought up like everything in 2020. We saw all these companies, and everybody wanted to say Black Lives Matter. Everybody wanted to change their logos and do all these things or whatever, and because it was the in thing to do, and they felt that was accepted. And for the most part, we all looked at that and said, okay, we know what this is. But the companies that were actually intentional about it and said, no, like we actually want to do something. We want to make sure that our workers here feel like they're in a safe environment. Like engage with the workers that you do have. If you have no like people of color or anything within your organization, it's going to be a little bit harder step. Intentional. Be ready to have an uncomfortable conversation. Check your bias. We all have it, right? And that's the thing that I think sometimes we weaponize too much. Everybody has bias. It's just human nature. But be aware of it and start saying, what can we do to make sure that we mitigate the bias that we know we may have, because maybe we went to Stanford or we went to Penn and this is mostly our group. So it's like, hey, we don't know like where to go, right? Some people have never heard of a historically black college or university. That's what I went to. Like, we don't know an HBCU, so we don't want to go walk on campus and doing recruiting. Like, start accepting those things, and then just like you do anything else, whether you're planning software or security, what do? You put together a roadmap. You put together a plan. What are the first steps that we can take? Okay, well, the first thing we do for recruiting, let's make sure, where are we recruiting? Who are our recruiters going after? Let's increase that talent pool a little bit. Hey, let's start talking about maybe working with some HBCUs or some black organizations like NESB, like and finding a way to get in there. And you can say, what about our hiring practices? What do we do when we hire, right? How do we make sure we mitigate during our hiring process, right? Simple things is, hey, let's remove the names from the resumes that we get in, and we literally just look at experience, right? And then when we say, yes, we want this person, now you get the names and picture and profile, right? So there are steps that you can take, but it really starts with just being intentional and separating away from the politicized weaponness of it all. Like, that's not what we're talking about. It's just, hey, we want to make sure that we have a diverse candidate pool of candidacies to get the best talent into our organization. If you start there, you will end up where you want to be.
Yeah, great. Well, we're out of time, but I really appreciate you coming, talking us through some of these complex issues that are facing the tech world, that are facing candidates of color, and what the solutions may be. Thanks again for being here, and hey, let's do this again sometime.
Looking forward to it. Thanks so much.